Hey, it's January 20th, 2026, 7:30 PM. I'm gonna call the meeting of the Town of Willington Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Members present, myself, Bob Shavit, Jeremy Brothers, Stephen Troyer, Becca Sinowski. I'll see Michael Johansson for Joseph Hall tonight. No applications for receipt tonight, no public hearings on the agenda. Brings us to item E, new business. Number one, discussion to include Conservation Commission members pertaining to proposed farm and agricultural ordinances.
We're up. My name is Kathy Demers and I'm the chairperson of the Conservation Commission. This is Jackie Collick. She's another member of our commission. She's also a local farmer in town. Tonight, we're coming before your board because we have brought forward some recommendations to the town to support farms. We're recommending three new ordinances. One of them is regarding right to farm, and the other two are regarding tax exemptions for farm machinery and farm buildings. And we did present this to the Board of Selectmen 2 weeks ago, and they asked us to bring this forward to the other commissions, including planning and zoning and economic development, and we'll be seeing them on Monday.
Okay.
So we had sent ahead, I don't know if you've had an opportunity to print them out. If you need a copy, we have extra copies. Jackie and I also have something called,
They do.
Okay.
So what you emailed me?
This is a new one though.
Okay.
Yeah.
You want me to make copies or you got?
Well, once we brought copies for folks.
Yeah, sure.
There's a couple of different things in here. We'll just refer to them tonight. So the first thing we wanted to talk about was the right to farm ordinance, and this is really already by state statute. There is a law that protects farms from nuisance complaints. And all that we're asking is that the town adopt the same ordinance, basically. And what it says to farmers that are in town now is we support you. It also says to new people that might be interested in coming into Willington to do farming, that our town supports farming. And we understand that there are some things about farming that may not be always as agreeable to people. There might be noise, there might be some smells, there might be some dust. You know, somebody's plowing up the field, but basically that we support farming. And this is already a right that farmers have by state statute. So some towns have gone forward to adopt this as an ordinance, just so they're showing their support. It's reaffirming that support in their town. So that's the first one. Would you prefer that we entertain some questions around those particular one by one, or do you want us to present them all? How would you like to do that? That first one that we were talking about, there's that handout on the top. This comes from the Connecticut Farm Bureau, which basically has set up model ordinances for all the things we're presenting tonight. So we didn't pull this out of a hat. We didn't make this up. We didn't come up with our own language for the ordinances. They're all suggested by the Connecticut Farm Bureau. And other towns, if you look on the last page of that handout we just gave you, this is a list of regional towns and the ordinances that they've adopted. Some of them have adopted the right to farm ordinance. Some have adopted some of the tax exemption ordinances. So we put that together because we figured there'd be some questions about what other towns are doing. Also, regarding the right to farm ordinance, if you look at our plan of conservation and development, on page 42, under preserving, one of the goals is preserving farmland and agriculture. We do have this already in our POCD that the town should consider adopting a right to farm ordinance to help support farming operations. And that's in your packet there that we just passed out on page 2. It's a lot to digest, I know. It's rough out there for farmers right now. There's a lot of things they're dealing with, you know, expense wise, as well as changes in our, weather conditions. There's a lot more costs for them involved. And if you look over time in Willington, we've lost some of our farms. For example, there's even like the Grimaldi tree farm, okay, because farm's not just vegetables or beef. It could be people that are doing the syrup operations, it could be people that are beekeeping, it could be people doing microgreens inside of a greenhouse. It could be many things. The definition of farming is very expansive. So we want to support all types of farming. And also the Economic Development Commission, if you look at their strategic plan, their draft, it does talk about supporting farming, agritourism and so on. So we're trying to all work together to, you know, help our local farmers and also encourage people to think about continuing to farm, continuing to keep their land open. Because it's also a value to the town, because when you develop the property, particularly if it's a subdivision or residential properties, it costs the town more to support residential property than it does open space.
I see the evaluation of some of the land that was the governor is stopped that please. That was in the news today.
Yeah, the 490 values.
So they had gone up and the farmers pushed back and they got the legislature and the governor to say, we're going back to the 2020 values. Yeah. That's on PA 490, which is use value of the land. So if you have farmland, you can apply to the tax assessor to have the land put in 490. And so it's taxed at a lower value. It's taxed on its use rather than if it was like the market value.
Yeah, we learned all about that Board of Assessment Appeals.
Okay.
And we got a pretty extensive.
We have about 67 properties that are in PA 490 in the town of Willington. So. But not all those folks are actively farming where they're making a revenue from it.
I see most of the farmland in is not being used right now.
Right. So that's the other thing that gets lost when farmland is developed. You're losing farm soils and you can't get those back. You know, that's really what this is showing too on that map, on that page 4 in the handout we gave you. It shows prime farmland soil and statewide important farmland soil. So once that's developed, you've lost the ability to use that in the future, pretty much. The hash marks, the red hash marks that say agricultural land use. Now, bear in mind, I have to say, this was put together for the 2018 POCD. So this was what was in 490 at that time. So the red hash marks show you the properties in town that were under PA 490 for farming. So I'll let you digest that a little bit. If you want to ask questions on that, maybe. So I think that's a little more germane to what you do for planning. And also from a zoning standpoint, we already have regulations in place about livestock and how much land people have to have for how many units of livestock and so on. Jackie, is there anything you want to add to that? Not right on that. So what we're really coming to the commission to do is to get your comments, and the Board of Selectmen would like to ask you for your comments in writing before they would move it forward to the town meeting, because this has to go before town meeting, any ordinances that are adopted. It's not up to you, it's not up to us. These are just recommendations coming out of the Conservation Commission. And they're all basically separate ordinances. One is not dependent on the other. So the town could decide to adopt one ordinance and not the other two. They could, when we start to talk about tax exemptions, townspeople could decide they don't want the tax exemption to be as high as what we're recommending. We're recommending what the state allows, but these are all things that the townspeople have a lot of input about.
I guess the first question about that would be what would be the impact of the town?
Well, we did talk to the tax assessor, so let us, does anybody have any questions about the right to farm ordinance?
No.
Okay, all right, so then let's move on to
I
this.
had one comment, I guess,
Yeah,
from experience. One of the things that is not defined in statute, it's not been litigated in case law, what constitutes a supporting or accessory use to a farm. And so I guess I'll say in a nearby community, we find ourselves as a planning and zoning commission defending a decision to allow public facing activities in conjunction with a bona fide farming operation. And person who is sort of taking issue with the commission's finding of that or making of that decision is arguing that the activities allowed are not accessory to a farming operation. And there's nothing anywhere. I mean, we have, the Connecticut Farm Bureau and those folks will tell you this is all part and parcel of farming, what people need to do to keep farms afloat. But there's nothing in state statute, there's nothing anywhere that actually defines that. And so it's really up to interpretation as to whether or not a tree farm that wants to have Santa and music and hot cocoa around a bonfire on Saturday nights for the month of December, if that's accessory to a farm. We may all think that it's part and parcel of what you might want to do on a big piece of property, but there's nothing anywhere that says that. And we don't have anything specific that really support that.
So like recreate Woodstock or something?
Well, it's more of the idea of trying to make sure that there's some language in the regulations that supports this broad, somewhat undefined, and constantly sort of fluid idea of the things that farms are doing to sort of continually shift. So I think, is there something that we need to do or should do, maybe not with the ordinance, but related to regulation, to just continue to sort of support and have that alignment? Because it is a little bit ambiguous, and then it's up to someone saying, well, I don't think that makes sense or whatever. And I think that creates potential point of rub, but sort of after the fact when the issue has already come up. The other thing that is a little bit of a maybe not a conflict, but when PA 490, when the town's ordinance for what is eligible for 490 was amended like 1920, I think, remember we discussed it here, Board of Selectmen made an amendment and they established a minimum acreage of 5 acres. And we basically said that makes sense to us because the commission looks at their definition of farm, and we define farm as 5 acres. Which means if you want to do farming in Willington and you don't have 5 acres, you can't. Because we say permitted use is farming, farm is defined as 5 acres. So if you want to have any agricultural activity on your property, there's not really a pathway in the regs to allow you to have a farming operation associated with your house. And I think, as they'll attest to, the average size of, your average farm size is getting smaller. Somebody might want to have, some stuff going on their property because they've got 3.5 or 4 acres and enough room to do it, but they're not a full-blown farm. It's accessory, but our regulations do not acknowledge or really create a pathway for someone to have sort of an accessory farm or a hobby farm or it, we don't, we're silent on that.
So I would ask if in order for a farm to be able to take advantage of some of these state things, of exemptions, they need to show that they earn at least $15,000. So I think as the population has become more urbanized, we look at an opportunity of I'll just say, small farm operation as an opportunity to be a type of entertainment. Pick apples, Santa with Christmas trees, et cetera, et cetera. So are you basically saying that that's what we should possibly have in our regulations? To
I think if you wanna be serious about encouraging these things, you know, if the town adopts a right to farm ordinance. But our regulations say you can't really do farming unless you have 5 acres, that would appear to be a conflict.
Yeah.
So I would think that we might wanna either sort of just pull back the standards and just basically say farming permitted, here you go. Or come up with some acknowledgement so that we can tell somebody that has you know, maybe a somewhat oversized residential property or whatever, that if they wanna grow zucchini and they wanna have a farm stand out in the front yard, they don't need to have 5 acres to do it. They don't need to go through, you know, in Ashford, farming is permitted. We don't have any animal density requirements. How many horses, how many chickens, where the coop is. We don't require permits for farm stands. You just put them up and they need to not obstruct sight lines. And in 7 years, not one time have we received a complaint related to any of that stuff, but we may have a little bit of a rub and it may be worth us pulling some of that stuff back if we actually wanna allow residential property owners to lean into some of these activities. And maybe we don't, but it's a conversation.
I think it sounds like the way Asher runs things would work out well, in my opinion, and so I think possibly great thought on the rest, but.
Yeah. Well, I wanted just to ask a question, so, cause I know for regular open space, so there's 3 classifications for 490, there's forestry. So you have to have 25 acres or more to be in 490 for forest. Farm, under state statute, doesn't matter, as long as you qualify as a farm, and the assessor makes that a determination. Like you have to show that perhaps you have some revenue or expenses, or that you're using it in a way that would be common agricultural practice. So, but then we have a third category just called open space. So if you have additional, this is my understanding, if you have additional land associated with your property beyond what's considered 5 acres, then you can be, the rest of that can be an open space. Oh, no, I'm sorry, you have to have a minimum of 5
Right.
on your residential lot, correct?
Right, so the balance,
Yeah.
if you have 5, the balance of the residential minimum lot size and anything beyond. Yeah, but I think
But for farm, you're saying you have to have 5 acres, I thought
in
that,
the zoning
I thought
regs,
it was just for open space.
in the zoning regs, we say a farm use is defined as blah, 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 blah. With 5 acres, so if somebody had a 3.5 acre piece of property and they wanted to. And then we wanted to consider that a farming use. They would not meet the standard, right, not PA 490, right,
Another thing is that, I remember that as a farm smaller than 5 acres, you can still register with the state as a agricultural operation, so it's possible we could. You know, work something in, like if you're a state registered farm, then you're exempt from the 5 acre rule. Because, you know, there's a lot of people growing things like microgreens, and those can be grown on a very small amount of space.
yeah, if you have bees, a colony of bees, if you have a maple sugar operation, you might be doing that on less than 5 acres. So I can see for animals, for livestock, kind of, but
Yeah,
Yeah.
we have, Ashford has reduced setbacks for agricultural structures, so the permitting path is a little bit easier. So, you know, it does, I think, somewhat depend, but if somebody wanted to have an agricultural operation on their residential property, they had 4 acres and wanted to grow and have a farm stand or have, you know, I don't know, maybe they just wanted to grow flowers and allow people to come and pick their own bouquets. A lot of people do that. There's really no path for that to occur in the zoning regulations now. You could put up an accessory building, but you know, you're again limited to the size and location and the ratios and all the things that are in there. And again, you know, we don't really acknowledge farming or agricultural activities as being accessory to something else. You've got 5 acres, you're a farm or you're residential use, so I think it's worth just
Another
talking.
thing I'll say is that my husband and I, both of us make our living exclusively farming, and we grow veggies on about 4 acres. And that supports our household. We have more farmland than that and that we use, but primarily it's that 4 acres. That supports us, so 5 acres seems high.
And when I was reading that, I thought, you know, we were looking at the livestock requirements, you know, how much property you have to have per unit of chicken or cow or whatever. You know, I was assuming that was just for livestock, the 5 acre definition.
Yeah. We have
But
a
it's not.
much greater standard if you wanted to have like a horse stable or whatever, but yeah.
The other thing I wanted to speak to was, you know, when you have kind of an accessory use, so let's say you have 5 acres or more. What is additional that you can do on the property that, you know, would basically be protected under the right to farm? And the way the state looks at this is that if there's a problem, like if you have a neighbor who's complaining about the noise because, you know, they're having Christmas music or this and that. Basically what they're saying is that the enforcement agent should meet with the farmer, talk to them about the complaint. If it appears the complaint is related to an issue that is covered under the right to farm law, the agent can contact Connecticut Department of Agriculture for determination of whether the farmer is following generally accepted agricultural practices. So, you know, would they stand by somebody who's playing Christmas music? Maybe not. I think they're talking more in the nuisance laws about things like noise from livestock or farm equipment normally used in acceptable farming procedures, dust created during plowing, odor from livestock, manure, fertilizer, feed, and then any kind of water pollution from livestock or crop production. But of course, our regulations about water protection and the wetland regulations has precedent over this. So that's what I'm just responding to your, what you were saying, Mike, about some of these other potential accessory uses. That you do have a way that you can go to the Connecticut Farm Bureau and ask them to kind of make a determination on that if you have an issue.
You know, part of EDC's goal is to promote agritourism, so you might be on board with helping to write something up to make it more inclusive.
Yes. Any other questions on that or comments? So
I guess the only part for me, obviously, I support farming and making it, you know, easier for people to do it without the nuisance complaints and all that. It's just, I'd like to understand the impact on tax and revenue and everything.
How much, so you're talking eligibility, how much personal property would come off the grand list?
Just an estimate, something.
yeah, we talked to Kara and she put something together for us, because we knew that would be an important question. So right now, we'll start with the farm machinery exemption. So by statute, the first $250,000 of assessed value of your farm machinery can be tax exempt. But you also have to do a couple things. First of all, you have to apply to the tax assessor. You have to provide a notarized, you have to sign and have a form notarized that states that you have at least 15,000 in revenue or in expenses to be able to apply for that tax exemption. So by statute, and we currently have 5 different landowners that are doing that. You can see those right now, they're already under farm machinery. It says how much the assessed value is for their farm machinery. All of them are under 250,000. So that's by statute. So the town has no control over that. We have to allow that exemption. The state has also allowed towns to opt to increase that by another 250,000. And that's one of the things we're asking the town to consider. Some of the other towns have adopted that. It's unlikely, as you can see from here, that anybody's gonna even meet the mandated value. But it doesn't mean in the future, if we had some large agribusiness come into town, they might be able to max it out to 500,000 assessed value on the machinery. So we don't know what the future holds. Would some of these ordinances encourage more farming in town, larger operations? We can't say for sure. Then the other exemption we're asking the town to consider, we're recommending, is that they adopt, by statute, towns are allowed to, by ordinance, exempt up to $500,000 on each farm building. So that's allowed by statute. Towns can opt to do that. They're not mandated to. And so what Kara put together, our assessor, for the people that now qualify because they had $15,000 either in revenue or expenses, she put down what their farm buildings are assessed at. So those 5 properties have farm buildings that total $500,000 in assessed value. And if you multiply that by the mill rate, potentially the town could lose $12,754 if each of those properties also applied for that exemption for their farm buildings. Do you have questions on that? And remember, farmers that are living on their property still have to pay property taxes on their homes. So that's not exempt. It's only buildings that are related to farm use. And that can include housing for farm, if they have people that work for them living in their buildings, so. Sorry. I mean, we know, obviously, town's very, very concerned about tax revenue. We've got a lot of things going on in town that are gonna require bonding and, you know, it's going to increase taxes. There's no doubt about it in the future between things like the school building, the fire department issues. So, and even if the town didn't move forward on those schools, you know, we still gotta fix the ones we have, so. You know, we recognize them. But it depends on what Willington wants to be too, you know, what I've heard is people want a balance, we want economic development, we're not trying to stop development, the Conservation Commission. Would like to see a balance, because that's what the townspeople have said. You know, when we've gone to town meetings, when we put our plan for conservation and development together.
Any questions?
I would like, have these documents been circulated?
They're linked on the agenda.
Okay, I didn't see that link, sorry.
The one we did give you tonight, the 3-page one, that's double sided, that one you even have ahead of time, so if you want that.
Yeah, we can upload that if you go to the agenda online. Or click on meeting materials, you can view the agenda and all, any of the stuff that's there.
Okay, thank you. So Kathy, the selectmen are just looking to get some general feedback from all the different commissions.
Right.
Before they make a decision.
Yes.
Okay.
Board of Farm. They said we gotta be careful with the exemptions. But understand, I was looking at this sheet here, it's saying. Just under 13 grand, it's not devastating,
Well, it's a total of 17, is that?
yeah, when you add the other 5 to it.
The other 5 is already exempt because the machinery is mandated by state statute.
So you're adding another 12, you know, 13 potentially to it. Around 13.
And it is an approximate number because it depends on who applies for the exemption. So it could be that not all of the farms who are applying for the equipment exemption apply for that building exemption, but it could also mean that some folks who aren't applying for the equipment exemption do qualify for the building exemption.
Well, one of the things that the town could do is just adapt what the state already allows for exemptions. I mean, they can do it anyway, but by jumping on board with what the state already allows, it basically shows that the town is interested in supporting farmers.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't be putting this extra money on the line.
So for these exemptions, this has to be a 5+ acre farm as it sits now.
I don't
Not by
think so.
statute,
Yeah,
no, not by
state definition doesn't require a 5-acre.
We have a whole bunch of 1-acre farms here in town with that.
But they have to show their $15,000, this is definite, they have to show they have $15,000 in revenue or expenses related to farm activity. They have to show that, they have to prove that to the assessor before they can get an exception. And if you want to talk to Kara more about this too, you know, the tax assessor, you know, there's no rush on this, wanna have more discussion with her.
And the draft ordinances are also, I believe, in this packet, right? So that has the exact language that we're proposing on how. But which is very similar to all other towns that have adopted this, adapted from the Connecticut Farm Bureau's recommended language.
Yeah, I hear your concerns about it, lost revenue, but I think it shows the farmers and it just puts Willington on the map insofar as saying, yes, we support supporting farming in our community. And even if we, and that would be not the maximum that that they're suggesting, but what the state now allows.
The state allows towns to adopt exemptions on farm buildings up to 500,000. We are, the commission is recommending that we go to that maximum that the state allows. But again, the townspeople could decide, well, we're not comfortable with $500,000 off of every building, but maybe 100,000. I mean, if you look at the list that we gave you to all the other towns that have adopted those ordinances, some of them have adopted, like Ashford adopted the maximum for both. So in the town of Ashford, you can be exempt up to $500,000 on farm machinery, $500,000 on every building. They're one of the ones that have recently increased what they allow for exemptions. Some of the others put their ordinances into place years ago when what statute allowed was up to, say, for example, like 100,000 on machinery. They just haven't changed them. So it doesn't mean that they won't, but you know, we're kind of new to the game right now, so that's why we're using those figures.
Something else that's worth considering. At $12,000 that comes off, which is, you know, I don't know what the fraction of percentage of the town's total budget is, but that's what, roughly half of the town's annual per pupil expenditure. So if you look at it from the development potential of the parcels, if this even saves one, if it prevents one additional school age child, right, your cost will be substantial on that side, right? If one of these properties were to be developed as residential and you got even one kid, then you'd be losing twice per year what you'd be losing if you put all these through an exemption. Obviously, that's not exactly how it works, right? We don't add 26 stuff to, but you know, when one of the things that I first started doing a million years ago when I started working in the very first town was looking at large tracts of farmland, figuring out what the development potential was, how many school age children we would likely see, and whether it made sense to try to acquire them or let them go based upon the cost of education. So there's a, you know, sort of the flip side of that coin, which may or may not come to fruition, but something that other towns consider.
For a lot of people who farm, their only asset is their land. They don't have a 401k, they don't have pensions. Unless they've been able to put away some money, maybe in some private, you know, IRA or something, they don't have a lot, so. As people age out in farming, a lot of people end up having to sell their farms, because that's all they have, you know, for their retirement. And that's when we lose a lot of our farms. And it's also hard for new people to get into farming, because they can't afford the taxes. So these are ways that we can support farming, if that's what Willington wants to continue to have, it's part of its heritage. If we want to try to keep the farms we have, and encourage people, young people to come up and take over and step in, you know, continue to, you know, grow vegetables, raise livestock. We have several farms in town that raise livestock. We have people that are doing haying in town. They're the ones leaving open these beautiful spaces, the Calbeth Farm, the Mahaliaks, the people on Jared Sparks, you know, these are the people that, these are our view sheds too. Do we want them to be subdivisions in the future? I mean, that's what the town has to decide. We've invited some farmers, before the EDC meeting on Monday. at 5:30 to join us, try to get some people in town. Who are in farming to come together and talk about, cause it's interesting, a lot of people are so busy, they don't even really know the other farmers in town. So we're gonna have them come together, and talk a little bit about some of the other challenges they're facing, so we can talk to EDC about that as well. So prior to the meeting, EDC's meeting on Monday. So I'm not even sure how that's all shaking out with rooms, cause I heard the school building committee was gonna start meeting on Monday nights too.
Beats me.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think the land use commissions have been meeting down here for like 350 years, but for some reason, we always end up getting bumped. I guess maybe there will be snow on Monday, so I don't know if we'll be meeting, we'll be Zoom, we'll have to see how that works.
Too bad Joe Hall's not here tonight, he could relate
Oh, yeah,
to this. for
yeah,
sure.
really.
Yeah. I'm supportive of this in principle.
oh, yeah. I think it's important that we show the farmers we are, the
I
town
do
is
too.
supportive. When you get to, what's
What's it gonna cost?
it gonna cost, that's open for conversation. And I mean,
So what's the right number? What's the exemption? What's the,
well, if we chose to do nothing and just say, well, we really don't care about the farmers, as opposed to, yes, let's support the farmers, at least to the level that the state is saying they have an exemption.
Knowing the
Well-
cost of equipment, I don't think anybody, you don't have a big enough tract of land for those big dollar amounts, that 250 or that big tractor appreciates so much.
combine?
Yeah,
Well, that's the total amount for all of your farm machinery. So
Yeah.
if you had several, I mean, new tractors these days are
yeah,
up to 100,000, so if you had several, then it could add up.
Or if you had we don't
Yeah.
have it, but like a big dairy operation, right, all
Yeah.
the machinery they have inside.
I just don't, right now, as of what you see in town, I think. I don't know where you put a dairy operation in town, that big. Goats maybe.
Well, the hay that they harvest in town gets shipped over to Coventry.
Yeah.
To get fed to the animals over there, so.
One of the things that's a little bit different about the ordinance adoption process from what you guys do here is that they can't just have a public hearing and listen to a whole bunch of people and then decide how they're gonna adopt language. You don't really horse trade the language, like we have some flexibility here to adopt additional revisions during the hearing. The town meeting process isn't, well, the town meeting process isn't that flexible or is not regarded as being that flexible. So you don't have, so I guess what I'm thinking is if you ran the most. If the ordinance went before town meeting at allowing anything that was possible and people thought we're concerned about this. Then you're likely to see that ordinance fail because they can't say, oh, well, we don't want 500, we want 250. So I'm just wondering if incrementally. There's some value to starting the way Asher did, which is to start at the baseline and then come back around. It feels like even if everybody's supportive, if the ordinance fails, coming back a second time, like, I don't know. When the EDC put that tax stabilization ordinance forward, there was a lot of support, but also a lot of questions, and you can't make amendments while you're all there. And so if you don't have consensus, the result is it gets voted down. And it's hard to keep that momentum and say, okay, we're gonna come back and.
Well, that's what my thought is insofar as, let's go with what the state allows, the lower level of 250.
But.
Well, that's
but we
already
don't-
mandated.
Yeah, we don't have to have an ordinance about that, Bob, because it's what the state allows and the assessor's already giving it to people that apply,
Okay.
yeah. The ordinance regarding farm machinery would be to have an additional amount allowed up to 250.
Okay.
But to, Becky's point, right now, there's nobody that even meets what the state allows, like right now, the people taking the exemption don't have 250,000 assessed value on their machinery anyway. Do we need to
You're not even
have
close.
the additional one in place? You know,
When we started this process, the state actually just raised the equipment exemption amount from 100,000 to 250,000. So when we started this process, there are some farms that were approaching that 100,000 threshold. It was just in October that they raised it, but we wanted to maintain and put in our ordinance to be adaptive with future changes to state statutes. So we were hoping to have the ordinances read the maximum amount that the state allows. So because it's the 500,000 for state, for buildings, that was updated 2 years ago from 100,000. And the equipment was updated this year from 100,000 to 250,000. So because of all these changes, we just wanted to have our ordinance read that we would allow the maximum exemption that the state allows. So that we don't have to change it in the future. Because that's why Ashford had to revisit it just last year, because their value reflected the previous allowable exemption, and they updated it when the state statute updated.
So you're off to EDC on Monday.
Mike gets to hear us twice.
I'll survive. We actually have a meeting, I've been working with the Connecticut Farm Bureau, Resource Conservation and Development Area, Connecticut Farm Bureau, for Casio for towns. So we're having a meeting in like the first week of February to talk about a whole bunch of things, and we're gonna have people from Department of Agriculture, KIP, I forget his last name, begins with a K, I can never pronounce it correctly, who's been in the ag industry, and a bunch of other people presenting on a lot of the zoning aspects of it. So it's been an agriculture related winter for me.
Any concerns, questions? No. No. Like I said, I'm generally supportive of this.
Yeah. I am.
Looking forward to here it goes with EDC. Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you for your time tonight.
Yeah.
Is there some way that at some point put us something in writing to the Board of Selectmen? Just, it doesn't have to be long, but just your general comments on where you, if you're in support of it, not in support of it, whatever. That's what they asked us.
Okay.
So thank you. Yes.
I guess I know who I am, I should have that.
All right, item number 2, commission discussion. Item A, HB 8002.
So just wanted to touch on this briefly to kind of just introduce the idea. I have 3 copies of the bill. It's over 100 pages, so I didn't print one out for everybody. But there was, so we heard many months ago, 5002, that was vetoed by the governor. They passed it in special session, a revised version. It's now 8002 or November special session, Public Act 25-1. There are many things that are included within it. I think the 2 most notable, at least when I was thinking through it, where we will probably have to start, are as of July 1st, 2026, towns will have to allow multifamily development, 2 to 9 units, as of right on any parcel zoned commercial or mixed use, subject to what they define as summary review. So think of that as a site plan, which means there's no discretion. So you can tell them they need 5 arborvitaes and they have to have 10 parking spaces and their setbacks are X, Y, and Z, but you cannot add any discretionary review related. Well, we're concerned about where this curb cut is. We have concerns about buffering or lighting or noise. All of the standards have to be explicitly defined in the regulations, and yes or no. So that sort of mandate or possibility comes into play as of July first, which means between now and July first, we basically have to have our regulations in order so that if somebody shows up and says, I wanna put, you know, I have this commercial piece of property and I wanna put 8 units on it, they can do it. They still have to meet the regulations. And obviously, you know, public health and all that stuff. But you can't require them to get a variance, a special exception, a special permit, or put any special conditions on the application. So that is one of the more important ones. The other one is the affordable housing plans, as we know it, are now gone. They do, the requirement to adopt a quote affordable housing plan no longer exists. That section was amended to now mandate that towns adopt housing growth plans. There will be 2 options for that. Essentially, the Office of Policy and Management, which is like the state sort of planning office, if we were to have one, is going to develop a methodology for how to calculate how many units, affordable units should be generated or should be constructed at a regional level. They will issue that number to all of the councils of government, and then the councils of government will determine how to allocate or issue those numbers to their member municipalities. So we will get a number through OPM down from Prague, and they will say, Willington, your number is X. It's likely to be very low, but we will then need to either participate in the CROG regional housing growth plan or decide we don't want to and we want to do our own.
But you also need a developer who wants to participate by building anything.
Right, yes. So this feels like a really, really, really big deal, but probably less of a big deal here because we don't have a lot of the development pressures that other towns are seeing. There's a new pathway for how we might get to a affordable housing 8-30G moratorium where we're not subject to 8-30G. But again, we're subject to it now. We don't necessarily have a lot of the pressures related to that. Some of the other things that are notable, we can't, if a housing project came before you, you could not deny it based upon a concern that there wasn't enough parking. So there's a lot of kind of aspects to this. There's a presentation or sort of a seminar that's being put on Thursday. I'm presenting a portion of it. So we'll likely see a lot of this kind of get handed out and understood after that. But we need to make sure that we have development standards in place so that as of July 1, anyone who wants to develop up to 9 units of residential multifamily housing has specific standards for what they need to meet. So we have control over what those standards are, but they need to be explicitly defined in the regs. So that will be a task that is before us. We need to kind of get on.
Are they going to define for each town what is affordable and a number?
Yeah, so it'll still be the Department of Housing numbers for what is affordable based upon area median income, but they will literally issue us a number. And you know, I think, like I said, the number will be small. But we're not that far off from the 10%. We're like 30, 40, not even maybe 50 units off of the 10%. So, you know, if we could get one development, or we could get a phase 2 of Button Hill, or if we could do something, I mean, we would be one and done. So what remains to be seen is if they're gonna take into consideration the town's number, right? So you have Bolton, which is at like 2%, right? Willington, which is like, we're like 7-8%, something like that. We're much higher. So are we all gonna just be issued numbers, or are they gonna take into consideration the fact that we are already substantially closer to where towns are supposed to be? Remains to be seen.
So in the town of Willington, what's an affordable 2-bedroom apartment? That means what's the price a month?
It's 30% of 80% of area median income, so it's probably, you know, a 2-bedroom, I would guess is probably in the realm, based upon the HUD numbers, $1,400.
That's still a lot.
The key difference is that the units to qualify need to be deed restricted for a period of 40 years. That's the hard part, is that every year HUD will say, here's area median income. And so then, okay, well, what's 30% of 80? And you adjust the number, and so it goes up slightly. But a developer has to be willing to deed restrict for 40 years. That's the part that makes it hard for people to wanna kind of go forward.
So it sounds, if all of this comes forward, it almost sounds like it's in the town's best interest to look into adding to Button Hill.
If we could figure out a way to get a phase two there or somewhere else
Yeah.
and just stamp it and replicate that, we would be done.
Mhm.
We would not subject 8-30G, we would exceed our affordable housing standard and goals, we would be door shut. 90% of everything that we talk about and hear about in the planning world related to housing would be not applicable. So yeah, even if we could, get a Button Hill phase two that was half the size. You know, it didn't need to be the total number of units, but if we could get that development again.
Well, the reason I say that, the town already owns the property, so that's one thing out of the way.
Right,
He's a developer.
yeah.
Well, yeah, you do.
Or a loan or a grant,
Yeah,
or, I mean,
right.
we're not eligible for CIF, but yes. Or the other option would be someone that, you know, you partner with somebody to allow, and they build phase two of Button Hill. It's twice, maybe something that is double the size of Button Hill, half the units are market rate and half the units are restricted, and they make their money on the market rate units. There's also some language that allows towns, if they partner in regionally with housing authorities, there's several different things in the bill. I will know more the next time we meet, but our main focus, I think, is predominantly gonna be on developing standards for how we expect these properties to be developed, should they be. So expect a little bit more on that.
Well, one of the big hurdles to overcome with affordable housing is trying to line up the land, the contractor, et cetera. And if you can get one of those things out of the way, the process could be simpler.
Yeah, the challenge now is that to get the tax credits that developers want, you basically need to do 100 units or more. Because it's so expensive to go after it and get the development that it doesn't make sense to do 30 units. Unless the town is gonna be willing to kick in money or, you know.
We don't have.
No, but what the town does have is land.
Right.
And so if you said to a developer, we're gonna give you this piece of property for you to develop it, and therefore we're gonna enter into an agreement for you to do all the following things, I mean, that is how. That is one way to sort of make that happen. There are nonprofit housing developers, and so there are options, but. I don't know that there's a lot of pressure here just because. You know, we're sort of disconnected from Hartford to some degree. Mansfield has seen a substantial amount of pressure. We're sort of removed from that, so. You know, we've got well and septic, no water, no sewer. So anyways, I just wanted to bring that to your attention. And if anybody wants a hard copy, there's 3 here, find it online, I can email it to you, but. You wanna go through it, all 100 pages or 100 whatever pages.
Oh, boy.
All right, item B, citation ordinance.
I wanted to come back to this, we talked about it. My recollection was it was not necessarily. I didn't get a warm and fuzzy from the commission on the idea of it, but I again wanna come back around to it because. It doesn't apply to people that. Aren't in violation of zoning regulations, but we. We were talking about it somewhere else, and I think it had come up or has come up previously with. Wetlands, we're working on this in a couple of other towns, just again as another opportunity. And so the idea would be that the town would adopt an ordinance for violations of regulations, and again, that could be. Zoning or wetlands. And it would give me, the opportunity or the ability to. To issue a fine, which could, depending on the severity of the violation, continue to accrue. If someone chose to willfully violate the regulations and not respond to our requests for compliance. The other thing that is somewhat helpful is if someone let's say it accrues and we tell them you owe this amount of money, you've ignored us for 4 months, and they come in and say, okay. I'm sorry, I get it, I ignored you, I'm gonna clean it up, I'm gonna clean it up tomorrow, and they do. The citation hearing officer in the town could essentially choose not to move forward on actually attempting to collect those fines. But they have 12 months to make the decision. And so the key there is it really puts the town in an ability to ensure that compliance is maintained for 12 months. And if 6 months later, they go right back to doing it, we are not starting from square one. We can set up, hey, you said you were gonna take care of this and you have not held to your word, so we're gonna come back with exactly where we left off and kind of pick the process up. We don't have the ability to just issue this and take them to court. The town would have to have a citation hearing officer, which would be someone that would be a volunteer member of the public to sort of, they could hear these things, they would make a decision on the fine, so it would not be staff just saying, here's a ticket, here's what you owe, and sort of us having this autonomy, but they can be very effective. And again, it's just another tool. It would not apply to anybody that was not in violation of the regs, or somebody who got a zoning violation letter in the mail and corrected it. But if somebody willfully violated commercial business that just said, I don't wanna do this, I don't care, whatever, just gives us another opportunity.
This would need to go to the town meeting and.
Yes, we need to go to town meeting. And like I said, we would probably write it so it applied if someone were violating inland wetlands regulations as well. We could issue fines.
I think we should consider it.
There'll be a lot of pushback at town meeting.
Well, it may get a lot of pushback, however, with the EDC study and everybody, trying to push for EDC, more development in town and such. I wonder if we shouldn't have some more tools in our belt to address possible problems.
Who's doing this well with such an ordinance already? But local, what,
A lot of towns have them. More and more towns are adopting them. Tolland has it. I believe Mansfield has it. I think Coventry does. Vernon does. I'd have to go through and look to get a sense of what other towns are look more broadly.
next meeting can maybe have an example?
Yeah.
Some other towns.
Yeah, I'm just curious, are those like reports like put out by the public and then they're like sought after internally to validate, or is it just?
For the towns that are collecting the fines, you mean?
Yeah. Like, how does it all start from one? Somebody saw this, reported it, who, and like the process of
It
it.
would become a second step in the enforcement process. So if they reported a violation, we would still do all the informal stuff, the notice of violation. And then depending on the complexity or severity of the violation, we could issue a cease and desist or cease and correct order. But if it's something like someone doesn't want to move their unregistered vehicles, right? We had a property, I forget where it was, way out in the middle of nowhere. And, if someone is uninterested in moving them, or commercial business that has, they're storing materials outside, or has signage that's not allowed, or is not complying with the terms of an approved site plan. Rather than saying, we're gonna send you a notice of violation, statute says we have to give them 30 days. At the end of the 30 days, if they don't comply, we have to then issue cease and desist or cease and correct order. Statute says we have to give them 30 days. At the end of that, we have nothing else. There is nothing else that the town can do. Except call Halloran Sage and say, start a court proceeding, and then we're accruing, hourly rates and whatever, and they're very reasonable, but there's nothing else we can do. As an interim step, we can say, okay, you don't wanna clean up or comply with your site plan, you're gonna be accruing a fine of $100 per day. And we're gonna, that'll sit and continue to accrue until such time as you rectify the violation or you appeal it or whatever. But it creates a little bit of skin in the game, because FedEx has never had any violation, but let's say you're FedEx. You know, like you're a really large corporation, you're not necessarily, it's the urgency isn't there. Oh, you're gonna come to court, you're gonna fight the town attorney. So having something that continue to accrue, you know, a lot of towns that have more large public works crews and other things might try to get an order to go on and remediate the property or take care of it, but we don't have that here. So it's, yeah, something that we may choose to go forward with if the situation warrants it, but is not something we would be obligated to do. We would have, you know, there would be discretion there.
Could this be confused by some people as a attempt to have a blight ordinance?
No, because it would not create a situation that's, the only things that would ever get a citation would be things that are already in violation of the zoning regs. So we're not changing the standard.
Okay.
I'll pull some more information together.
Sounds good. Certainly something to look at.
Yeah, I think so.
Item C, single family student housing.
So this is something I just wanted to talk a little bit about. I was hoping Bill would be here. He'd provide some color or context, but you know, we obviously know that we have student rentals in town and you know, students which live together and occupy single family homes. The challenge that we have and the potential complexity is that we're bouncing back and forth between the lines of what constitutes a family and the occupancy of a single family home. And so we'd had a property owner reach out who has a home on their street, which is occupied by students. It has been, you know, used as student housing for many years. This person's new to the neighborhood and you know, been going back and forth on a lot of the components and legalities. And, you know, I try to impress upon them that given Willington's situation, this is not really about this property. It's sort of about the position we have taken or will take on this issue going forward. And so I didn't want to sort of be having that discussion in a vacuum or me just explaining that to her, you know, on my own. If the commission feels like this could be, or has been an issue, you know, we may have to make decisions on how to regulate that. And I don't know exactly what that looks like now. But I guess the question is, do we feel like this is a hill we need to explore, determining whether or not we ought to be dying on it? Or is it something that's come up but hasn't created sort of an issue town-wide? Because essentially, if we take the position right now, student housing and students living in a single family home are not a family, then, you know, what's the ripple effect? How many of those homes exist across town? And I don't want to make that call on my own and end up fighting 25 properties in court. I think I'd rather have a more open.
The problem comes in here when you drop this like right in the middle of like a relatively dense subdivision or where the houses are close together. You have parties in there all the time, you know, all hell's breaking loose.
Yeah.
And then everybody has to deal with it around it. Believe me, I've experienced this.
Yeah.
Yeah, a few years ago. So it's
Not consistent with your expectations of a
it
single
is
family.
100% not consistent with the expectations. The police down like every day, you know, for getting called. You know, doing little about it until somebody overdoses in there, which is what happened.
Mhm.
So it's just not a pleasant thing to live next to.
Yeah.
So I used to own a single family home in Mansfield that we had as a rental. And one thing I could appreciate was we designated as a rental property for either a family, and we had students a couple of years. But we had rental inspections, we had to prove parking, we were only approved for X amount of parking. There was a whole plan and they re-inspected every 2 years, if I remember correctly. And it kept the property honest, the amount of occupants honest. It didn't allow it just to turn into a slum because they had to come through, look at it. I can't remember if there was some kind of fee associated with it. But it limited us to what we could do. And we had a stamped plan inside the house that when they would come, yep, here's our parking plan, we can only have X amount of vehicles, which we can only have X amount of people, X amount of, rooms. And it was something at the time I thought was kind of crazy, but now looking back, I could appreciate it because it just kind of kept some type of
These
oversight.
aren't necessarily students, you can have a whole bunch of unrelated people living in a house. Complete free for all. The house isn't even properly insured for that kind of thing, like, you're not gonna just call your insurance company, hey, I'm stuffing a whole bunch of people in here, So under normal homeowners insurance, they wouldn't cover a situation that happened there.
So,
I'm
yeah,
not saying this is something we die on the sword for, but this is not something I think we want to fully support, the people do it, they're gonna do what they're gonna do. If there's complaints, we gotta deal with them, but
Well, I don't see there's a huge groundswell of complaints.
no, there is not, so, but I think at this point. If you look at our. If you look at sort of the understanding and our definition and everything surrounding this idea of family. Without changes to the regulations or adoption of rental registration ordinances like Mansfield did. It is a little hard to take the position that 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people living in a single family home sharing a kitchen and cooking and bathroom facilities are not a family. How long they are there, whether they intend to leave after a year or 2 or 3 or 4 is not sort of something that we can, oh, they're students and they're gonna be done at the end of, 2-year term or whatever it is. So the slippery spot is we are really taking issue with how to determine what constitutes a family. Absent additional language in the regs, and that's the part where I said. Given everything that I know about everything in the state related to family and the occupancy of single family homes and related, unrelated individuals. I do not think that with the language we currently have, we would be wise to take enforcement action against students occupying a single family home. I think we'd get our butts handed to us in court.
So. Let me put it this way, what would your suggestions be to help us? Put some grit on the slippery spot that you see.
Well, I think we could, if we wanted to, we would have to explore. Options for regulating them. Making an amendment to the definition of family in a way that maybe is. Supported by town council. Could be an option, creating a special permit process with very, well-defined standards that acknowledges the nonconformities that may exist and sort of through some encouragement allows for people that are running these things now to come in and get approvals. But the easiest and the most well-established and well-supported from an enforcement standpoint would be the rental registration ordinance. Because the ordinance can apply unilaterally, whereas regulation cannot.
well, what is the current issue going on? Is it a nuisance?
It's everything you described. They're up late, they're outside until 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning. Cars are parked all over, music's playing, trash in the yard, just the.
I don't blame them for being pissed. How would you feel if you were living
Yeah.
next door to that?
100% agree.
Work.
The
sucks.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
how would you feel if you were next door to it?
Well,
Yeah,
It's
so
easy to talk and laugh until you're the one dealing with it.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Stereo at 10. Yep. Well, why don't we do that was the last thing that you had mentioned?
I mean, what I can do is kind of maybe put together a menu of options and you can look at them.
Yeah, why don't you do that?
Okay.
And I don't think we're like complaining about somebody that's renting an extra room to a college kid or something, you know,
No.
this is like when you stop a house full. And then they, you know, all the, you know, what the neighbors are going through be damned, that's not okay.
Well, we had the same
Yeah.
conversation about the in-law apartments and
Yeah.
what the potential was there also. So this is our next step after we've dealt with that. Maybe this will be a little bit more that we didn't put onto the in-law apartments that could get out of hand.
Yeah, and this property in particular was essentially, it, you know, was a raised ranch, it was essentially converted and it's a 6 bedrooms. There's really not a lot of common space. And, you know, they came in and it was, the septic was appropriately sized, and so they're renting, you see it online, and, you know, being rented by the room. Between several $100s a month per bedroom. And that's, you know, so yeah, I fully understand the implications as to an abutting property owner. You know, people in my neighborhood that are, you know, have a similar situation, and it is not ideal.
No,
But we have to be careful that, you know, we don't run at this sort of in the wrong way and end up having our hands tied, or end up with, you know, as is the case, I think in Mansfield, is that the people that own these rentals sort of come together and they sort of collectively push back on whatever it is we're doing, and now we're dealing with 25 properties. I think we just want to be sort of eyes wide open to what it is, which is why I didn't just say, yeah, we need to do this. So I think this is likely a conversation that involves, you know, the commission, discussion of options, sort of the legalities behind each of them and what makes sense.
well, I think what we've talked to you about before is give us some suggestions that allows you to enforce what that would make enforcement easy for you or easier for you.
Yeah. Yeah, so I can. Yeah, we'll chip away at some of these things one at a time, but I will start
Yeah.
putting together
All right.
something. Some options.
All right, no unfinished business tonight, item G, approval of minutes from December 12th, 2025,
I had it wrong on there, it's December 2nd.
December 2nd,
The minutes are,
2025.
I move we accept the minutes from December 2nd, 2025, as presented.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
I
All right, no correspondence tonight, Mike.
no, not beyond
All
what
right,
I,
item I, public participation for items not listed on the agenda, anything from the public? Okay, no staff report tonight,
nothing beyond what we talked about above.
brings us to item K, it's 8:48 PM, meeting adjourned.